Well, life is filled with turning points, right? Like just this morning, walking around your house, you probably made multiple turns, going into different rooms, and then you got in a vehicle and you made your way here, and whether you counted those turns or not, you probably made several. But it's not just the physical turns that we make. Life has a lot of metaphorical turning points in life, some that are really exciting, right? Like maybe it's a career change, or it's a major landmark in life, like graduating high school or finishing college, or maybe it's starting a family, getting married, all of those major moments of life. Some of those turning points are not near as enjoyable. Maybe it's a loss of a job, or it's a change filled with grief. And sometimes we can find ourselves going through turning points that can leave us feeling a little bit anxious, because turning points have the ability to steal our peace. Sometimes they have all the excitement of the world, but sometimes we're paralyzed with fear because we're just worried, what if I make the wrong decision here? Or what's the, quote, right decision to make in this moment? Or there's the fear of what's going to happen. All of this is very different. This is uncharted territory, and it can leave us with a lack of peace. So this morning, I want to look at a story at the very beginning of a book in the Bible in the Old Testament called 1 Samuel. Now, 1 Samuel is itself, the entire book, is a turning point in Israel's history. It's coming right after the end of the Judges, where Israel's going through this vicious cycle of doing good, not doing good, getting caught up in sin and idolatry. God sends them into captivity, sends them a judge to deliver them, and rinse and repeat over and over again. And you open up to the story that you read about in 1 Samuel, and it's a turning point because you're going to meet the last judge and one of the great prophets of Israel. But it begins with a story about a young lady named Hannah, who is herself at a turning point in life. She's at this intersection and she doesn't know what's going to happen. She's married to a man named Elkanah, and Elkanah may be a good guy, not really sure, but he's got another wife named Peninnah. Now, we're not going to get into the whole idea about the Bible and polygamy and all of that. Let's just suffice it to say it's not a great recipe for a peaceful home. And theirs definitely was not. And so every year they would travel all the way back to Shiloh, where they're going to offer a sacrifice and worship God. And this family is in complete competition. These two women are competing for approval, and Peninnah is just winning like crazy because Peninnah has the ability to have children. She's given Elkanah many children, and Hannah, bless her heart, does not have the ability to have children. And she's growing up in a culture where her value is based on how many children can she have. So for Hannah, the inability to have children means she has no worth, at least in her mind. And because she has no worth, she has no peace. And Peninnah just keeps rubbing it in. And every year it's like they get to Shiloh and Peninnah is either pregnant or about to have another kid. And it's just this reminder, even when she doesn't have to say it, that Hannah's worthless in her own eyes. And she'll go every year to Shiloh and plead with God, please let me have a baby. And bless her heart, her husband is as foolish as they come. Sometimes we can be foolish, can't we, men? And he looks at her one time and says, honey, am I not worth more than 10 sons to you? No, Elkanah, you're a polygamist. You're not worth more than 10 sons. You've got all kinds of other problems. You can't replace the very thing that she wants. And her heart is broken. And that's the thing about these turning points, can sometimes steal our peace, because Hannah finds herself at this point where it's not just that she's heartbroken, but she's entering into this phase of life called despair, where she starts to feel hopeless. She begins to wonder, are things ever going to change? Is God ever going to listen? And she's living without any kind of peace. Until there becomes this turning point in her life. It was a major turning point because of what she did. In 1 Samuel chapter 1, starting in verse 10, it says she's deeply distressed, and she prayed to the Lord, and she wept bitterly. Now, this isn't the first time she's prayed to the Lord, but this is a different prayer. That's what the writer of Samuel wants us to know. She vowed a vow to the Lord and said, O Lord of hosts, if you'll indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I'll give him back to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor will touch his head. She's telling God that this son is going to take the Nazirite vow. He's going to be your dedicated servant. And what she's doing is she is completely surrendering in this moment. Yes, she's asking God to give her a son, but if you read through her prayer, she's actually surrendering this very idea. It's no longer, God, give me a son so that I can feel a sense of worth in my life. It's, God, give me a son and I'll give him back to you. I'll surrender the very thing that I have wanted so much. She is laying down before God what has been her definition of peace. What she thought was going to bring her peace and value in life, she's laying it at the Lord's feet and she is completely surrendering. And after this prayer, it says, she got up and she went her way and she ate and her face was no longer sad. What a powerful, powerful story. That's just the highlights of this story. I'd love for you to take some time this week and read through Hannah's story. And she teaches us a really powerful lesson that's simply this: true peace is found in the presence of God. That's it. True peace is found in the presence of God. Now, Hannah teaches us this idea that there's a difference between true peace and what she had defined as peace, which you could call worldly peace. Now, worldly peace, or peace that the world promises, looks like peace. It's all circumstantial. Worldly peace is completely circumstantial. It's why it's so fragile. It's why our peace can so easily be broken, because if it's circumstantial, it means that as long as everything lines up correctly, then I can be at peace. And when I make this plan for my life, as long as everything's going exactly how I've laid it out, then I can be at peace. But Hannah was not experiencing that, which is why she had no peace. She thought, by this age, I'll be married, hopefully to a man with only one wife. Well, now he's got a second wife. That's no peace. And, well, as long as I can have kids, and that'll be okay. Well, I can't control that. And so therefore she had no peace. And you just think about our lives and all the different situations that come up, the very things that promised us peace, then life happens. And maybe it's an economic downturn, it's a health crisis, maybe it's relational conflict, and what we thought was peace in our life is now filled with nothing but conflict, because we've convinced ourselves that peace is simply the absence of conflict. As long as nothing's going wrong, and as long as I am completely in control, I have peace. But that's not the peace that God gives to us. That's not what John read to us, the kind of peace that Jesus promised. Or excuse me, Daniel, not John, Daniel. Daniel read to us this morning. I actually asked Daniel if he could be my volunteer to demonstrate worldly peace. Daniel, do you mind coming up here? I brought with me a stack of books this morning. We recently, I shouldn't say we as if I had anything to do with it. There's a group of people that's been cleaning out the attic over in the fellowship hall and found a whole lot of books. And so I've just been looking for ways to use them. And so Daniel's going to be my little volunteer this morning. And so we've been convinced that there are certain things in life that will give us peace. Like, for instance, one of the things would be success. Success will give us peace. Daniel, hold out your arms. I'm going to ask you to hold some things this morning. All right, just whatever you do, try not to drop them, okay? So if I can just be successful in work, I can get that dream job I've always wanted, and I can just maybe get that next promotion, then life's going to be awesome. I'm going to experience peace, but, then there's the next thing that's going to give me peace. Maybe it's going to be some type of relationship. If I can find Mr. or Mrs. Perfect, that's going to give me peace, and that's going to bring this sense of satisfaction into my life. And, well, at some point we need to, I got to buy the ring, and I got to drop down on one knee, and we got married, and that's going to bring me all kinds of peace in my life, right? I know those of you that are married are laughing. My wife and children are out of town today at golf, so I can't get in trouble. All right, so then you're like, speaking of kids, let's have children. That will make our home really extra peaceful. You okay there, man? He's good. All right, hold on to those. All right, and then if I can work long enough and I can just try to save as much as I can, then I'm going to be able to experience financial security, and one day I'm going to be able to retire. How you doing there? Good. Is it getting a little heavy? A little bit. Okay, now Daniel, I'm not going to add any more because I'm concerned about safety at this point, but although we could continue to list the things we've been convinced will bring us peace. Is that bringing you any kind of peace today? Not at all. Not really. Not at all. If I say, Daniel, I need you to hold those the rest of the day, would you be able to do it? No, not at all. Okay? None of us can, right? Because what we thought was going to bring us peace has now created a burden. Did you catch that? What we thought would create peace has created a burden. So what do we need to do, Daniel? What do you want to do right now? Take them off. You want to take them off. You want to set them down. Go ahead and set them down. I'll help you. Go ahead. Lower them down. Lower them down. You got it? Way to use your legs, not your back. There you go. Good. Perfect. How do you feel? Good. Much better now. Yes, what Daniel just did is what Hannah did at Shiloh. All the things she thought would give her peace. I'm not quite done with you yet. Give me one more minute, okay? What she thought would bring her peace created burdens. And she goes to Shiloh there in 1 Samuel 1, and she surrenders them. She sets it down. I thought having that kid would bring me peace, but I recognize it's actually just created a greater burden. So God, if you give me that ability, I'll give it back to you. It's a complete surrender. And what she found is what Jesus promised, what Daniel read to us. What Daniel read to us is Jesus said, my peace I give to you. My peace, I'll leave it with you. Daniel, hold out your hands. That's my Bible. Is it heavy? No, okay. That Bible symbolizes the peace that Jesus gives. Because in this word, we read about all the very burdens that you were just holding, right? Financial stewardship, family management, relationships, career, everything that we talked. Plus, we didn't even add on to that about what do you do when life doesn't go the way that you were anticipating? What do you do when everything is completely wrong and off? And the word speaks to every bit of it. Daniel, if I said I really want to challenge you to carry that around for the rest of the day. However, you don't have to hold it like that. You can hold it like that. You can stick it in your back pocket, whatever. From now till the time that you go to bed, do you think you could carry that? Would it become this heavy burden that you're like, I just can't hold this anymore? You could handle that, right? Thank you for being my volunteer this morning. You can have a seat. Because that's what happens when we receive the peace that Jesus is offering to us. One was a burden he couldn't hold for very much longer. The other is light and easy, just like Jesus said, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Because when he offers us his peace and we receive it, all the very things that were a burden are no longer a burden because they were simply a gift. And now they can retake their place in our lives as God's gift to us, not as the source of our peace, but as a blessing from God because his peace is only experienced in his presence. So I got 2 points of application for you this morning before we close. The first one is simply identify your fragile sources of peace, because we can be so guilty sometimes of placing our peace in a place that cannot deliver, and we experience these burdens. And if you're wondering, well, how do I do that? Well, first off, I'm going to tell you it's not easy and it's not fun, but it's going to require you to look inward for a little bit and to ask yourself a series of questions. You want to write these down. You want to take a picture of them. I can send them to you later if you don't have time or have the ability to do either of those. What's making you anxious or angry or hopeless when it is threatened or taken away? That can quickly identify a fragile source of peace. What's consuming my thoughts and my attention? Where am I investing the majority of my time, my energy, my resources? Oftentimes that can identify a fragile source of peace. Where do I turn when life feels overwhelming or when conflict arises? Am I turning to the presence of God, or am I first going to Google? Am I turning to social media? Am I going to a group of people? Because I might just be utilizing those those as my source of peace rather than the very presence of God. Am I feeling drained or overwhelmed because I'm trying to hold everything together? Did you walk in today feeling like you're holding 40 pounds worth of books? Because if you do, it's very likely that you have placed your peace in the wrong place. You've placed it in something that cannot deliver. And it cannot begin until you identify, where have I placed it? Hannah couldn't make that turn in her life until she recognized, I've placed my peace in this idea of having a child. And it's not delivering because I can't control that. So I'll just place it in God and I'll surrender it. And if He allows me to, I'll give the child back to Him. I'll surrender everything because she experienced true peace in the very presence of God. And secondly, once you identify it, just bring it to Jesus. That's what He calls for us to do. Just lay it at His feet. It's not that He's going to take it away. It's that it's going to maintain its proper place in our life. When we learn to bring our careers, when we learn to bring our families, our relationships, our finances, when we learn to bring our cares and our anxieties and our worries, and we lay it at His feet, it's no longer a burden. And we learn to trust Him with it, so that He can give us back His peace as He helps us with every single one of those, so that they no longer rob us and steal our joy and our peace, but they breathe life back into us. That's what Paul said would happen in Philippians 4 when he said, don't be anxious about anything, but in every circumstance, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And when you do, then the peace of God that will blow your mind and surpasses all understanding, it's going to guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. What's it going to guard your heart and mind from? From losing your peace, from fear and anxiety that are robbing you of peace and joy in the life that God promised. But it doesn't happen until you surrender. And one of the ways we surrender that is through prayer and that word supplication. Not a word we use on a daily basis, right? It just simply means to ask for help. It's like Daniel holding onto those books saying, yeah, I need a little bit of help setting these down. That's supplication. And we go to God and we say, God, I'm holding this burden and I can't hold it for very much longer. And I know I shouldn't anyways. I need your help. And that's the first step of surrender. And that's when God says, here, let me help you set that down and I'll place back into your hands my peace. It's going to guard your heart and your mind so that you don't have your joy stolen anymore, or you don't have your peace robbed from you, and you can experience the very presence of God. So back to Hannah. She went home, she ate, and her face was no longer sad, right? And I love the Bible. It says in due time. It doesn't tell us how long. It doesn't tell us 9 months later, 9 years later, in due time. Because once she learned to surrender, it was just a matter of time. God's time. In due time, Hannah conceived, and she bore a son, and she called his name Samuel. El, at the end of any Bible name, always refers to God. And that first part, Samuel, that first part means God heard. That's why she named him that. I've asked for him from the Lord, and then Samuel, God heard my prayer. And when we come to God with our burdens and we lay them down at His feet, He hears. And what do we need most right now? What do we need most as a church? What does our world need the most? It just needs peace. And that cannot be experienced outside of Jesus. And so God hears your cries. He hears your prayers. He sees your burdens. And just like Hannah, He invites you to experience true peace that begins with the very first step of surrender. And when you surrender and you lay whatever those burdens are at His feet, He will hand you back His peace that will guard your heart and mind. What a trade. When you hear it put like that, it's kind of crazy to walk out of this room today still carrying the same burdens you walked in with, right? Why bear that burden anymore when Jesus is offering to give you His peace and to lighten your burden? If we can encourage you anyway this morning, pray for you, if we can walk with you through your challenges, if you're ready to put Christ on in baptism, to receive his Spirit, to have your sins washed away so that you can begin this walk with Jesus, a walk that is filled with peace and life, we'd love to encourage you, to lift you up, whatever we can do to help. Our shepherds will be up front and in the back if you want them to pray with you and to pray over you. If you want us to pause as a church family and to lift your burdens to the Lord as you take that first step of surrender, we'd love to encourage you as together we stand and sing.